when you first join Eton, you're always given a dictionary, a small book, with the vocabulary you have to learn as a teacher as well as a student that we use here, that is not commonly used by people outside Eton. And it's not a kind of language to prevent other people to understand what's going on. It's just the traditional usage of old words that are not used in modern English anymore. Simple example, word lesson in Eton is not in usage at all. You would never hear anybody using the word lesson, which is you would expect, you know, in school to be used quite often. Simply because the only classroom of Eton was subdivided into two by a special division, which is a wooden block. It's like a fence. And when the masters changed from Latin to Greek lesson, they shouted something like change division, and they changed from one side of the class to the other. And this wall is still used as a word for lesson. So in our language, division is a synonym for modern word for lesson.
So crazy. We're different languages, not English. Sort of Beak is a teacher. I don't really know why. It's sort of tradition, I think. And also we have sort of, you know, break. It's not called break, it's called chambers. And it's called chambers, I think, because all the Beaks go into the main school hall. We go back to our houses and have, you know, cakes and things and relax for like 10 minutes or something. And they go to chambers, which is a big meeting for Beaks every morning. And then we then meet them outside chambers to talk about, you know, anything. Sort of, sorry sir, I've got a music lesson in your div, so I can't make your lesson, or sir, I haven't done your EW, which is homework, so please can I be excused, or sir, I've got this and this commitment, you know, would you like to come? And it's sort of a meeting place between Beaks and pupils.
So although you understand all these words, and there's quite a lot of them, you're actually quite lost. And the funny thing is, if you're a young teacher and you don't know all these words, boys very quickly suss you out that you're a freshman, which can be quite embarrassing. So it's very important you do your homework before you start teaching.
Sometimes people say if we wished to somehow leap into the modern age and show the world what a new, lively place we are, then we just wear ordinary clothes. So why keep this strange dress? And it's a funny thing to wear. Well, actually, if you ask the students themselves, in a very large majority, they would wish to keep the uniform. If you have to wear any uniform, then they would rather have this one than anything else. And it's interesting why that's the case. Partly because there is a sense of tradition about it. Actually, it's pretty practical also. It's quite hard wearing and tough, so it's an easy thing to wear. But also, it is very good, you know, at making people anonymous in the street. Because once you wear a uniform like this, everyone looks the same. And it's a very good defense against tourists. Good story, nice story. I was told this by a boy who left here 2 years ago. He was cornered in the street wearing his school uniform by tourists really wanting to take a photograph of one of the royal princes when the princes were at Eton. But he had to do. And so he dutifully allowed himself to be photographed. And as they were taking the photograph, one of the royal princes with some friends walked right past them wearing school dress, and they didn't notice. And it's quite convenient that it enables everyone to feel part of this community and to be a little protected perhaps from some of the intrusions of the outside world.
This is my standard Eton uniform. I'm an infantryman, as if you'd like to put it that way, sort of bog standard. Sort of tailcoat, waistcoat, trousers, shoes. And this is just a normal tie, which is sort of, you undo it like that, and then you have a collar stud there. Collar stud there, and you do it up. So it's a detachable collar, and then you just do it up like that. And then you have this thing, which is sort of a white sort of, I don't know, vicar-like tie. It's called an Eton tie. And then you sort of do it up and fold it back in. But as you get more up in the school, you go into your last year, and then you start getting prefects, and they get to wear bow ties.
Boys have a Eton suit, as it's called, yeah, which looks like an evening suit for gentlemen. For teachers, it's a bit easier because we have only requirement for Eton masters is Windsor collar that you can see here, which is stuck on. and the bow tie, which is a symbol of a teacher, so only teachers are allowed to wear it. Suit can be of any type or sort, it has to be dark one, but that's the only requirement. It's very smart, and it creates a particular formal atmosphere in a classroom, which shows due respect, so they respect us, we respect them as well, and that creates an atmosphere of academic learning.
When I started here as a boy, for example, it was still the case there was physical beating. You know, if you were in trouble, you did something wrong, then you would be hit for it. You were beaten with a big stick. Still happened.
Really?
Yeah. Not often, but it happened to me on 1 or 2 occasions for doing things wrong. And I mean, this is long, 20 years ago, 30 years ago that went, and the notion of doing that now is not even in the mind, and it's a totally different way of thinking about life.
They're normal boys, they sometimes misbehave, it's quite a rare occasion, nothing serious, but we do have a system which works effectively and has been proven over the centuries. Things like being late to lessons, being late with your homework, being impolite to adults, being absent-minded, violating the school tidy routine, they're all different things. I mean,
so if you do a bad piece of work, you get a rip, which is symbolic of a bad piece of work. So your teacher will rip the top, and that's called a rip. So you have to take that to your housemaster and get it signed. A bit less than a rip is a get signed for information, which says this wasn't too good, take it to your housemaster so you can have a look, you know, you didn't do too well. Rip is a bit worse. Then you've got tardy book, which is not academic misbehaviour, it's more general misbehaviour. So I don't know, being late for a division, again, that's a lesson. Being late for a div, you can get tardy book for that, and you can get 3 days tardy book, which is getting up early in the morning to sign a book really early, and then you're half asleep, so it's most people don't like it.
When somebody comes late with his homework to me, I say it's irritating because I like to mark them all in the same time. So if you're late and somebody else is late, it messes up my routine. So we mess up their routine, so they have to get up early. And it usually works wonders. Very quickly, they get into line very quickly. That's kind of minor things.
Then after that, I suppose you've got the bill. And the bill is a sort of form of detention where you see the headmaster, he decides what punishment to give you. So it could be detention for 2 hours. It could be chores somewhere, which is, you know, tidy up one of the classrooms for 2 hours, or anything like that. It could even be sort of maybe going to the fields and clearing that up. So that's the bill. And then there's close gating, which is a form of internal punishment. So let's say you've been drinking on Saturday evening and you come back completely drunk. You then have to stay in the school and wear school uniform for 3 days completely without changing, and you have to sign into school office every hour so they can check where you are. So that's a bit annoying, sort of big brother is watching you sort of thing. And then the biggest is expulsion. You get expelled.
A good school is good for many reasons, and whether it is single-sex or co-education, that's not one of them. But one of the things I do notice in a single-sex school, in a boys' school, is that the quality of standards in everything that is done here is exceptionally high, not just in academic work and sports, but also in art and in music. And I think there is an argument that when teenage boys are able to focus on what they do within the community of the school without distraction, they willingly give more than they would otherwise do. And people, it's a very busy place, this. People work extremely hard in all kinds of areas. But to give an example, also, that at my last school, in subjects like English literature, most of the students, when they became age 17, 18, and you could choose subjects, most of the students would be girls. And in physics, the students would be boys. It developed a certain kind of pattern according to gender. Whereas here, the study of English literature is a normal thing. Boys do it, it's not an issue. So there are some advantages. There are disadvantages too, one can argue. both systems work very well. But I think there is a place for single-sex education. It is a minority now in England. The vast majority of schools in the state sector and in the private sector are co-educational. So it is only a smallish number now that remain single-sex.
Surprisingly, if you say to most people, would you like to go co-ed? They'd say no, I think. Because they've got so used to being an all-boys school, and then on the weekend you relax and you go and see the girls, and it's just the way you're perceived. Actually, no distractions in lessons. Don't so no distractions, and just just concentrate on what you got to do. And it's just, I think most people accept the tradition. I think, and it doesn't bother most people. I think
every boy has a mobile phone. Every boy has a laptop. You're in contact with your friends and your family all the time. It's a totally different feeling to the idea of boarding, whether this is at Eton or in any boarding school. I sometimes say I am of the generation when you were taken to school at the beginning of the term, and if you were lucky, your parents picked you up at the end of it.
It's quite a busy day today. Wake up. Meant to wake up at 7:30. Woke up at 8. It's bad. Went to breakfast. After breakfast, go back to the house, get my books ready, then we have to go to chapel. Although we had assembly today, actually, so it varies. Went to assembly, had a speech about Nelson, because it's coming, the anniversary of Trafalgar, the Battle of Trafalgar is coming out. So talked about that. Well, he talked to us about that. We just sit there listening, half asleep. Then we had 3 lessons, or divs, we call them divs. Then you have chambers, which is break time. Chambers is about 20 minutes. Then you have another couple of divs. Then lunch. After lunch, you usually have sport. A lot of the people do sport, or depending on what your extracurricular things are. I personally was doing social services this afternoon, which is helping the community, which in C Block you have to do, because you either have to join the corps, which is sort of join the sort of little military, Eton military corps for a year, where you sort of do soldier stuff, would be, or you do social services where you help the community and help old grannies and things like that. So I do that on Mondays. Did that for a few hours. Then came back, had another couple of divs. Then here, interviewing with you. And then I've got orchestra tonight after supper, which goes on till about 10. And then I have to do my work. So,
working at Eton is more of a lifestyle than just a job, and very often you can easily work 12 hours per day. And you work 6 days a week, including Saturdays, and if you're lucky, you get a Sunday off, where you can have just a bit of a rest and prepare yourself for the next week.
There's a school pub called TAP. Outside Eton, it wouldn't be legal, because it's for 16, 17, 18-year-olds. It's sort of special rules, and it applies to Eton, and you can have, a couple of pints and a meal. Now they've brought in a new law, which means that they've gone all high-tech, and apparently we can only have 2 pints maximum with a meal, because it's the government's being all tight about alcohol, and we have to put our fingerprints in, and so they monitor how many pints we've had, so we can't just say, oh, I'm getting one for a friend, or, don't ask me.
On a rather different track, Thursday evening is the House Choirs competition, the House Shout. It is a major event. There are something like 21 houses entered for it, which means an awful lot of boys coming and going from this relatively limited space. If you're a deputy or a house assistant and you're approached by your housemaster, I'd be grateful if you make yourself available for at least part of that evening.
No, it is a big operation. It is a complicated business simply to run. We have 1,300 students here. Each boy has his own room. So if you like, on one level, Eton College is a hotel operation of 1,300 rooms. That's quite a big thing to run anyway, let alone the educational side of it. So it is a big operation, but it's also highly stimulating. And the reason I think Eton will, and institutions like it will survive, is as long as people are enthused by the human dynamic, being part of a community in which so many good things happen, then places like Eton will thrive. And I think there will always be that need. It doesn't matter what technology we have, what distance learning, what computers, there's still this extraordinary inspiration you get from being with people who are just committed to what they're doing and just so good at what they do. And I talk to boys who've been students at Eton, and ask them what they remember about their time at Eton. You know, was it the